Welcome back to the show. This is a Relax Radio, RELAKS, without the X, because we believe in that positivity. And yeah, you're tuning in into Real Talk with me, Nick, keeping you guys company all the way until 5 p.m. So now, hey, we were talking about how these travel restrictions are being lifted and how there's going to be a traffic light system around the UK and its citizens. Especially when it comes to international travel. So the question, that is in a lot of people's minds is which countries are we on the red list, and what are the countries essentially that we can travel to, and what are these quarantine rules? Well, the UK's red list of countries from which entry to the UK is banned has been expanded to include Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kenya, and the Philippines. So yeah, the changes which came into force on the 9th of April follow concerns about the spread of new variants of the coronavirus in these countries. So yeah, there are fears, that the vaccine may not work, and yeah, there's a lot of fears, especially when it comes to these variants that people, are concerned about. And there has been a lot of concern arising because of this. This is just one of the reasons. So which of these countries are on the red list? Well, the changes mean that there are nearly 40 countries on the government's red list of countries from which travel is banned. And so these include essentially the Middle East, which is Oman, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And then you can't travel to countries in the African continent, which is Angola, Botswana, Burundi, Cape Verde, and all of those countries. And we got Kenya, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Rwanda, Seychelles, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and all of those, South Africa. And then in Asia, we got, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Philippines, South America, essentially most of South America you cannot travel to. And yeah, so this is just a bunch of these countries. So what is, this traffic light system? Like I said, what is it different from the red list? So essentially, when it comes to the red list, countries on these lists cannot travel to these countries. So British nationals or residents returning to the UK will have to pay for 10-day hotel quarantine. So yeah, so non-British nationals or residents who have passed through these red countries will be refused entry into the UK. So yeah, if you're not a national of the UK, if you don't have a UK citizen, British citizenship, well, you cannot enter into the United Kingdom. That is just, for especially when it comes to people who are residents who are from the UK, they still cannot enter the country immediately. They have to stay in these 10-day quarantine facilities, to get themselves checked out and to make sure, that they don't carry any kind of potential risk of variants into the country. So that's just one of the things. Like I said, we got the amber colors and then the green color. So essentially, if it's green, there's not going to be any kind of isolation required. But before you leave and after you arrive, you will need to do these PCR tests. So what are these hotel quarantine rules? Well, if someone who has been in through or any of these red list countries in the previous 10 days, they will be refused entry to the UK. An exception is made for British or Irish passport holders who are people, with the UK residence rights, but they must first pay a quarantine in a government-approved hotel, for 10 days. So essentially, people who are of these passport holders, people who hold these passports are allowed into the country, but only after they've had a quarantine of about 10 days. So that's right. That is just, what is, going up right now. And in England, this costs essentially up to £1,750 per passenger traveling alone to cover, the transport fees, the tests, the food, the accommodation. So nothing is free. Essentially, if you are traveling and if you're coming from a red zone country, you will have to pay all of this. And it's a lot of money to travel. And in England, this, like I said, this costs £1,750. So for every additional adult or child over 12 must pay £650, while children aged between the ages of 5 to 12 pay £325. Yeah, that's a lot. Like I said, traveling is going to be expensive right now, and there's been a lot of criticisms from conservative parties complaining about this, especially when it comes to the tourist industry. A lot of them are, totally against this, and say, especially when it comes to the tests, people are not completely on board with it. They're not happy with how expensive everything is. So yeah, also, when you travel and when you come back, you have to have a proof of a negative coronavirus test to enter the UK. So rule breakers can face these strict penalties, including prison of up to 10 years. Yeah, that's right. 10 years, 10 long years. So basically, if you don't follow these rules, you can end up in jail for a decade. That is just there. And it's this is what is happening. So how will all this quarantine in England work for travelers from red list countries? So essentially what they're going to do is they're going to get a negative test of up to 74 hours before their flights, and they must quarantine in these designated hotels for a maximum of 10 days, and the quarantine arrangement must be made before they travel. At the hotel, they must stay in their rooms, and they should be tested on day 2 and day 8. And if they're positive, they will have to stay longer. And the 10-day quarantine bill was essentially, like I said, is going to be £1,750. Yeah, that's a crazy amount of money right there. But it's just one of the reasons why traveling right now is not for the poor; it's for the rich. I mean, let's be honest, right there. The facts is that travel right now is for the rich, and it is a luxury. And yeah, so the other thing is, could these European countries end up on this red list? Well, the health minister, Lord Bethel, said it's possible that the UK's nearest neighbors could also be added, and this is going to be with huge regret. So one of these countries will be Portugal, including Madeira and Azores was on the list, but was removed back in March 19th. So yeah, under these lockdown rules, holiday travel is currently not allowed either in the UK or abroad. So essentially, if you go abroad, you are not supposed to, you will get a fine of £5,000. That is a lot. £5,000. I mean, that I'm just emphasizing the 5,000 because that's a lot of money to be paying, and I think it's not worth the risk, in my opinion. So hey, you can only travel abroad for essential reasons. So these essentially, like, it could be reasonable excuses, for domestic travel, including work that cannot be done from home, medical appointments, educational reasons, and all of that. So what are these testing rules, and when you get back to the UK, what are you going to face, especially if you come from a country abroad? So all of these, all the travelers to the UK must complete a passenger locator form in advance, including their departure country and their UK address. So they also have to show proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken within 72 hours before traveling to be allowed entry. So yeah, travelers also must then self-isolate for another 10 days on arrival. So there are specific rules for people arriving in each UK nation. So that's like I said, if you're coming from England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland, I mean, there are going to be rules that you will have to follow. So returning travelers must also take a coronavirus test on days 2 and 8 of a quarantine, and it's going to cost them essentially £210. So if they are tested positive, well, they must self-isolate for another 10 days. So that is essentially £1,960. That is almost £2,000 right there. And it's crazy. So there's also penalty, £1,000 penalty for not taking the test. If you don't take the test, if you refuse to take the test, well, you'll have to pay £1,000, followed by a £2,000 fine for failing to take the second one, with quarantine automatically extended to 14 days. Yeah, that is, that just be smart. Don't do anything stupid. Don't be rash. I mean, think things through, and don't travel only when needed. Especially don't be traveling because you want to have a good time or anything like that. Travel only for the essential reasons, because you can face up to, like I said, £5,000 fines. And there'll be fines like this when you don't take your test or you refuse to take your test. Well, that is also another thing that can happen. And yeah, and can you pay for your test to shorten the quarantine? Well, under the test to release scheme, travelers from some countries can take a test on a day 5 of their isolation. But people, who test positive negative can stop this isolating. Those who test positive must quarantine for 10 more days after the test. So anyone using the scheme still has to take a further test on the 8th day. So this is essentially, like I said, the costs of all of this will range. It's going to be ranging between £65 to £120. So yeah, that's just only for the PCR test. That is just, I'm telling you right now, in my opinion, if you don't need to travel, don't travel right now. Because like I said, there's also going to be this, although you get the green list, and a lot of people are against it, especially this whole traffic light system is all great, but people are not happy. They're suggesting, why don't we use the lateral flow tests? Well, like I said, one of the reasons why you don't we don't use these lateral flow tests is because the possibility, yes, it's cheaper. It is more cheaper. It is cost effective, and it's quick. It's very rapid. It's very quick. But then at the same time, you have chances to miss out on a person, whether he's positive or not. You're not 100% sure. It's not 100% effective compared in comparison to a normal regular PCR test. So that's just something right there, some food for thought for you guys to think, especially if you're planning to get out of the country to travel or something. Well, you better think twice. And with that, we are gonna take a real quick break. And checking a look at your time right now, it is 4:42. Good evening.